Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I welcome the government's acceptance of the bill. I think it's extremely welcome, and I think it's a tribute to the social movement that took place around the marriage equality referendum. Because let's face it, if that referendum hadn't been passed in such a decisive way, I don't think that we would be having this debate or acceptance of this bill, possibly. I think I'd like to begin by thanking the teacher unions, the ASTI, the TUI and the INTO for their support for our bill, and also for ICTU Youth, who came out with a statement in support last night. I'd particularly like to pay tribute, though, to the LGBTQ groups within the teachers' unions, because some of the remarks that I'm going to make will show just how much fear there is among teachers about coming out as being gay, and even about having a non-conforming lifestyle in many cases. I speak as somebody who's a member of the ASTI, and I know many personal cases of teachers who've hid their sexuality, and I know they've had to suppress who they are in school. And we now have a situation where somebody can legally marry but can't go into the staff room and openly talk about that, invite people to their wedding for fear of negative consequences for their employment or promotion prospects. And I've personally spoken to teachers who don't tell anyone at school that they're gay and who continually check themselves in case anyone guesses that they might be gay. And this isn't just in rural areas. This is in Dublin. This is in the capital city this year. As my colleague mentioned, a number of teachers spoke to the Journal, who I think did us all a service. But one teacher spoke about being invited in on Monday for a chat with the principal of the school and the chairman of the board, who obviously happened to be the local parish priest, having been seen in a particular pub with somebody of the same sex. And that teacher, the remarks were prefaced by saying, we're not telling you what sexuality you can be, but we are telling you that you can't promote that lifestyle in this school. And this is happening in this country in 2015. That person did suffer within the school. They were isolated, they were bullied in effect, and they had to give up some of the extracurricular activities that they were doing with young people. And I think there is a silencing effect on gay and transgender teachers in our schools because not just of Section 37, but I think the lifting of Section 37 would send a really strong message to teachers to take courage, to come out and to challenge homophobia within schools. I think we'd also have to say, why is there this culture in schools? And it is because of the religious ethos which pervades, which views LGBTQ people as somehow disordered and somehow not being safe to be in the company of children. Because during the marriage equality referendum, one point that was made by a bishop was that, are you seriously expecting us to teach about same-sex relationships in schools if this referendum is passed? That was actually the issue for the church. But I think it has opened up what is going on in schools, that there is this chilling effect on teachers in particular. I looked up statistics for the United States because it has been asked, well, look, what's the big deal? Nobody has been sacked. 11 people were sacked in 2013 publicly who came out and said they were sacked for being gay in the United States of America. 10 of those 11 worked in education. Now, why is that? That teachers in particular are somehow subjected to a different standard than other workers. And I don't think that it's acceptable. It's certainly not acceptable following the marriage equality referendum, where people made very clear they want to lift discrimination, they want to end the oppression of the past, and they don't want to see people being upset in their personal lives. We haven't seen sackings yet, but you don't need to be sacked. I mentioned the case of the teacher called in for a chat, and we've also had, which the Minister commented on at the time, somebody actually hiding their own face. Now, this isn't unusual, because we held a press conference in the Anti Austerity Alliance this morning. I spoke to a number of teachers, asked them would they speak at it, who I know feel really strongly on the issue, and they were afraid. You know, even post the marriage equality referendum. And they were afraid that it would somehow jeopardise their relationship in the school, their promotion prospects. Now, it isn't just gay and lesbian teachers who face these threats. This is actually a broader issue as well. Eileen Flynn is a case that some of us are old enough to actually remember as it was going on. A teacher who was in a relationship with a separated father of 3 young children, who became pregnant and was fired from her school. And she lost her case subsequently, because unfortunately in Ireland there is an exemption in reality to allow discrimination by religious-run institutions. Unfortunately for Eileen Flynn, she wasn't a union member as well, which didn't help. But the point about it is that could that situation happen again? I actually think it could. There are cases, particularly in rural areas, where school management have a very conservative ethos. We've seen cases cited in recent times. I think the school was in Sligo, where they talked about why should we introduce a child-centred education, when a whole number of cases were brought up of sexual abuse allegations. So I don't think it is actually out of the world that this would actually pass. Again, in the States, where Catholic schools are an increasing sector in education, a teacher in a Catholic school in California was sacked days after marrying his partner in a civil ceremony. The reason given was that the marriage occurred and the school's position was that it violated church teachings. The school issued a statement saying that it will continue to educate students, quote, in the tradition of the Catholic faith. As a Benedictine school, St. Lucy's is a community for those who wish to express Christian values in education and develop person and academic excellence. So, in other words, people are expected to conform to a narrow view of what the Catholic hierarchy deem to be acceptable. There's also been a case in the States of a teacher fired and called an immoral sinner by a Catholic school because she had IVF treatment. So she came into the school, she announced that she was pregnant, and she disclosed to somebody in good faith, in a personal conversation, that she'd had IVF treatment, and was subsequently dismissed because it was deemed that it wasn't a good example for others, for students, and it didn't go along with Catholic teaching. Now, I think what Section 37 is bringing up is the historical connection between church and state in this country, where 96% of primary schools have denominational patronage, 90% of them are Catholic-owned or run. The situation in secondary schools isn't that much better. Like, we have the title of community schools, but in fact there's Catholic patronage in many of those schools as well. And this does not reflect a choice among the population, because there is a big demand for more diversity. I know this from my own area. But even if it did reflect the wishes of the majority, minority rights also matter. And the United Nations and the Council of Europe has raised this issue of education 5 times with the Irish state. State-funded schools pay the state funds all schools. It pays the salaries, it trains the teachers, but it allows admission policies which are exclusive, and it allows exemptions to employment. We need a separation of church and state in this country. That's become patently clear from the marriage equality referendum and from the wishes of the majority in society. It was young people who led that movement. What does it say about the homophobic and transgender attitudes that must be prevalent in a lot of schools if teachers themselves can't come out? What message is being sent to students who are gay as well? And also, let's not forget, in the tragic case of Savita Halappanavar, The fact that this is a Catholic country was cited by some health professional. And we have archbishops on the board of the National Maternity Hospital. Like, why? What gynecological expertise does a bishop have to be sitting on a maternity hospital board? We need to separate church and state so that women receive the care that they need and so that minorities of all kinds are protected. And we also have the huge issue of freedom of conscience, where people who aren't Catholic or aren't religious are being forced to teach religion and also to go to schools where they don't really want to go. So I welcome the support for the bill, and I hope it is moved very quickly and not left to gather dust.
Thanks, Deputy.